And today we're really excited to chat with Margarita from ClassPass about how ClassPass is redefining localization and expanding user research. Just before we jump in, just know that this session will be recorded and sent out later. And if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to drop them in the Q&A box and we'll move to Q&A at the end of the webinar. Great, looks like we've got quite a few people from all over the place. Munich, London, Lisbon, hey everyone. Great, thanks for joining. All right, let's get started. So my name is Charlotte Creaser. I'm a customer success manager here at Smartling, joining from the UK, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Margarita today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great. I'd love to quickly introduce Margarita. She's the Localization Operations Manager at ClassPass, where she drives the localization experience. She has 12 years of experience in the localization and translation industry as a project and program manager, as well as a freelance translator.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here today. And again, thank you for having me today.
Great. Thanks for being here. And we have a really exciting agenda today, as you can see on the screen. We'll be learning more about ClassPass, their localization challenges, and how they've been streamlining, as well as some interesting discussions around user testing. So I'm really curious to know if anyone here already knows or has used ClassPass. So do let us know in the chat. And meanwhile, Margarita, do you want to tell us a little bit more about ClassPass?
Yeah, sure. What is ClassPass? ClassPass is a membership-based app and website that allows users to access tons of studios, gyms, spas, salons, etc. around the world. With ClassPass, users can try all kinds of classes and experiences, from more common ones like yoga, HIIT, Pilates, to stuff like gymnastics, pole dancing, rock climbing, and even surf classes. They can also use their subscription to pamper themselves with a massage, with a facial, getting their nails done, or relaxing in group meditation classes. It is a really great app if you are into wellness or into fitness, and if you would like to add some variety to your routine. So ClassPass was, can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, thank you. ClassPass was founded in 2013, and it quickly started expanding in 2015. We are currently in 30 countries, and we are in over 2,500 locations. Our app and our website are translated in 10 languages.
It's a really impressive number of cities, but what does this mean for localization and the role of the Loc Manager at ClassPass?
So at ClassPass, localization sits under the marketing team, but we get requests for all parts of the business. As you can see here on the slide, we get requests from the legal team, from the product development team, from customer experience. So we have our fingers in all the pies. We operate with a lean localization team, which is to say that it's basically me doing all the localization. And we need to make sure that the localization manager didn't spend all their time on execution. So we wanted to be able to focus on strategy, on optimizing our content, and to keep on bringing more users to ClassPass. So the challenge that we had was, how can we reduce the time that we're spending on execution and increasing the time that we are spending on developing this strategy? And this is actually where Smartling comes into play. We use several connectors that allows us to integrate directly into our existing tools, so that we can remove the majority of the prep steps, the manual prep steps, such as uploading and downloading files. You can see here on the screen, for example, we use the Contentful integration and HubSpot integration for our websites. We use Figma for our visuals that we use in ads and emails. We use Zendesk to integration to help us translate our Help Center articles. And we use a custom API with GitHub that connects to Smartling to translate our app and our app website and website UI and UX. We also rely on Smartling language services that help us provide translation services for some of our flows, like legal translations. What I would like to show you next is an example of how our workflows changed when we started working with Smartling integrations. Can we have the next slide, please? Yes. So looking at this is actually an ad that we created for World's Mental Health Day. And as localization managers, if we see this, if we get this request from for localization, the first thing that we see here is that it's very wordy. It's quite crowded in terms of the text. There's all this like curly text. So it wouldn't leave us a lot of space for translations in languages that grow, like Spanish, like German, for example. This ad was created in Figma, and before we started using Smartling, we actually didn't really have a way to integrate Figma with Smartling. So what I would like to show you next is an example of what it would have looked like to translate this ad without the Figma connector. So, for example, we have here all the steps that we would have taken before. As you can see, it's quite time consuming. There's lots of steps, and it would have taken us an average of 3.5 hours of admin work, and this is not counting translation time. As I said before, we didn't really have a way to import Figma files into Smartling, which meant that we would have to copy paste all the text into an Excel file and wait for the translations to be done, then to copy paste the translations back into Figma. This would also mean manually uploading and downloading files, including the visual references for the translators. As you can imagine, there's a high risk for human error here, especially when you think about pasting the translations back into Figma. There's always a risk of pasting the translation back into the wrong location, not pasting the full sentence, and particularly if this is being done by someone who is not familiar with the language. So if a designer was doing this. To counteract this, we would have to have longer QA times to ensure that the translations were error-free. So looking at the next slide, we can see what our processes were after we integrated with Figma connector. We can see that many of the time-consuming steps were cut down. So we went from 3.5 hours to 1 hour of execution time. This is because we were able to cut all the copy pasting from the process, because the copy is imported directly from Smartling, from Figma into Smartling when the job is created in Figma using the connector. And there's no more manually uploading or downloading of the files. This is also all imported via the connector. What this meant was that we will also be able to drastically reduce the QA time, because of having the visual context in Smartling. So let's look at what the visual context looks like in Smartling. So this is the view from the translator's perspective, from the CAT tool. I'm not sure if you all use the Smartling tool as translators, and if you looked at the translation view. And you can see here that the visual context is directly imported into Smartling from the Figma connector. And actually, you can see an example where the strings are highlighted directly in the content. And this really helps translators understand if they have the right context when they're working with creative copy, particularly. And it does save me the time of having to upload and download the visual context. Is something that I would often forget, and then would get queries from translators asking to have some visual context for this. And yeah, so the translators would be able to immediately make the creative adaptation to make sure that the copy fitted in the right space. So let's look at the next slide, where we have an actual example of what this looks like after it has been translated. This is translations into, we actually translated this into 5 languages, and these are just 2 of the languages. And you can see that the final product actually looks quite good. The translations didn't grow too much, and we were able to keep it within the right space for the final translated content.
Amazing. Thanks so much for walking us through that. And what kind of results did you see from implementing these integrations?
So in terms of results, we were able to save around 970 hours of execution time over the last year alone. And this would have been time that we would have used to create the job files, to add instructions and visual references, to copy paste the strings into Excel, like I've mentioned just before, and then back into the final target. And this was not only my time that was saved, it was also the graphic designer's time and the engineering's time. So if we think about it, at the end of the day, everyone benefits from automating localization. It's not just the localization manager.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And with that impressive number of hours, what have you been able to do in that time that you freed up from these tasks?
Yeah, so having this extra time actually allowed me to better understand our app and web flows. And what does this mean? It means that I was able to fully understand where users are spending their time in the user journey and how we can optimize these flows to improve the user experience overall. Another thing that I've been doing is spending a lot of time working on the tools that Smartling integrates with, which allow me to become familiar with these tools. And in practice, what this means is that, for example, I'm able to independently QA and publish localized contentful pages. I'm also able to make copy updates and export Figma visuals. And this means I'm less reliant on other teams and I end up saving them time. Another things that I've been doing is working with Google Analytics so that I'm able to make more data-driven decisions for localization. And in practice, what this means is that, for example, if a marketing manager comes to me, a regional marketing manager comes to me and asks me to perform a certain task, and I'm juggling several time-sensitive tasks, I'm able to establish priorities by understanding the business impact of each of these requests using these metrics that I can get from Google Analytics. And finally, another thing that I've been working on is user testing. And I would love to talk about user testing in a little bit more detail and show you how it can be used in localization. So what is user testing and how can it be used in localization? User testing is a part of user research, and typically it's used in UX design to gather qualitative data around the user's expectations about new products or new features before they're launched. In localization, it can actually be used to gain users' insights, to gain insight into the user's understanding of our translated content and to help us direct optimization efforts in localization. So it often involves prototyping different flows and asking users to complete tasks and to test these flows to provide their feedback. Up until recently, ClassPass had only used user testing in UX design, but it's actually a really powerful tool. So we wanted to be able to use it to understand how people feel about the localized experience and not just the content that is in English. So we can ask users if the content that we have feels culturally relevant, if the navigation on the website is straightforward, if the sign-up process is clear, etc. So looking at how we can set up a user test, first you'll need to have an account in a user testing platform. Here at ClassPass, we use a platform called usertesting.com, but there are actually lots of these platforms online. And then you go through these steps that are on the screen. So first, you define the audience that you want to test. You decide how many users, what their social economical background, their age, understanding whether they're familiar with your product or not. Then you create a set of screener questions that will help you to then select these users. For localization, when we create screener questions, we always want to ensure that the users that we are testing are native speakers of the language that we want to test. Then we develop the test plan with the prompts and the tasks that we want users to complete during the test. Finally, the test goes live. And if users qualify in the screener questions, they will complete the tasks and record their experience. Then we get to analyze the results of the test and collate their feedback into an action plan. The most important part of getting a really good user test results is to make sure that we have a very strong test plan. So on the next slide, we will look at what a test plan actually looks like. So this is the test plan. It consists of a scenario, and the scenario is used to provide some context. So for example, a generic context that we use at ClassPass is you're interested in choosing a new fitness and wellness program to fit your lifestyle. You hear about ClassPass and you decide to check out their website. This sets up the scene for the users. Then we will have like a set of prompts and tasks, and these are usually quite directive and open-ended. So for example, before click on anything, please explain what you think ClassPass is, or where would you like to click? What do you expect to see upon clicking? Again, we need to kind of leave these not open-ended, actually close-ended, because we want users to answer what their feelings are, and not just answer yes and no. So actually open-ended. And we want to give users the room to voice their opinions, and we want them to ask you like how they're feeling about that specific moment when they're testing something. We want to access their immediate reactions and their immediate feedback. Then we also have some more directive tasks, like we would ask them to navigate to a certain page and click on a CTA or on a specific section, or we would ask them to, for example, on our website, to go to our website and search a class in your area. And then here on the right, we have a simulation of a user flow. We recently ran a user test for our Dutch web homepage and for our sign-up process, and this is a simulation of the sign-up process. For this test, I created a simulation of the sign-up flow, where users can go through the full experience of signing up without having to share any of their personal information, such as credit card details, their email, their name, etc. So it makes users feel more confident about going through these processes and not having to share any information about themselves. So finally, once the tests are completed, we would go into the platform and analyze the user sessions. This is actually what it looks like on the user testing platform. You can see at the back, you can see the user screen recording. And then there's a visual map at the bottom based on the user's feedback, where you can quickly identify if they're expressing positive feelings, negative feelings, or neutral feelings. So here on the screen, you can see that the user felt that the fact that they had to click through to go to our pricing was a bit of a pain point, and we can very quickly identify these pain points or their positive feedback. Once all the sessions are analyzed, this feedback is collated into a list of actionable items, and then we action them based on the impact. For the Dutch test that I ran recently, we actually had really good feedback in terms of the translation. So there were no actionable items related to the translation, but we did get really good insights in terms of what kind of information users can expect to see on our website, where they find this information or where they would like to find this information, and whether the sign-up flow is clear and easy to follow.
Great. Perfect. Thanks so much for walking us through user testing. They're all really interesting insights. We're close to the end of the session, so I'm curious to know, other than user testing and user research, what else are you excited about for the future of the Loc Manager role at ClassPass?
Yeah, so there's so much potential for things that I can achieve with localization at ClassPass now that we are benefiting from these streamlined processes that we have with Smartling. But the two things that I would like to focus on at the moment, and they're really an expansion of what we've been doing so far. So one, I would like to continue making localization more data focused, and then to explore further automation optimizations. And the way that we are doing so at ClassPass is by expanding the skill set of the localization manager. And what it looks like in practical terms is, for example, learning SQL. If you don't know what SQL is a programming language that is used to process and retrieve data in databases. So for example, let's say that I wanted to find a particular segment of users in our ClassPass database, like how many people in Germany receive our newsletter emails. I could run a SQL query about this on our database and then find this information to make impact-based decisions. Another thing that I think would be great to do is to learn how to code, because this gives me a better understanding of the variables and the placeholders that are used in our app and UI strings that are sent for translations. And we all know that often translators ask questions about these. And if I were more comfortable with programming languages, I'm sure that I would be able to answer these queries by myself without relying on the engineering team to answer them. And then finally, another thing that I would like to keep focusing on is on Google Analytics. And I've mentioned Google Analytics here before. It's a really powerful tool, and it's super important to make impact-based decisions to understand where we really should be focusing our efforts in translation and localization.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Margarita. I think that's the end of the presentation, and we'll now move on to the Q&A. So if you do have any questions that have come up during the talk, please feel free to write them in the chat. And we already have a few that have come in. So to start us off, Margarita, are you able to run user tests in the native language, i.e. ask the questions in Spanish, for example, and receive the answers in Spanish? I'm thinking of users who don't have a good command of English and how they might struggle with completing a user test in English. Good question.
Yeah, sure. We can do that. The way to do that, so you remember when I was talking about the user testing, I mentioned the screener questions. So this is where you would set up those questions to make sure that the users that you're testing can that they can speak Spanish, and to make sure that that they would feel comfortable in answering the questions in Spanish and running the whole test in Spanish. The only challenge with this is that you need to make sure that then internally you have the resources that understand these languages to be able to interpret the questions, the answers that the users give you, and to be able to then back translate that into English and to create the full action plan in English.
Great, thank you. And another question that we have that's come in, how do you track your admin tasks?
Your
admin time, sorry. How do you track your admin time?
Well, it's the same thing, but yeah, internally we use a tool called Asana. It's a project management tool. It's really great. So yeah, it allows us to understand how much time we are taking for each of these tasks. We actually don't have like a proper like tracking method, but after doing this a few times, we know that setting up a project will take around like 15 minutes. We know that the copy pasting tasks would take, like it depends on how many words there are in a specific project or specific job. But yeah, we can have an understanding based on the repetition of these tasks.
Great, thank you. And following on from that, how long does it take to run a user test from beginning to end?
That's a really good question. Normally, it depends on how quick the users respond to the screener questions and they get selected. And then, so basically, for example, if you were trying to test users for a language that is not so common, so there aren't as many users subscribed to these platforms, it would take us longer to find the users that we want to test, so to narrow down to the number of users that we want to test. So the actual test itself then takes around like 10-20 minutes per session. And then it depends on how long it will take you to analyze the questions and to write the action plan. So most important things is understanding whether the user testing platform that you're using supports the languages and supports well, basically like you can test for the language that you want to focus on, and then getting the results analyzed.
Great. Thank you. And thanks everyone for the questions. Another one here. Can we please get a view of the structure of your external team?
So looking at the slides of our external team, yeah, if we can share the screen again and have a look at the slides. Or do you want like a more detailed description? Sorry, I'm not sure I understand this question. If you want to look at the actual slide again or understand the structure of our external team, what the translators that work for us? So yeah, well, with ClassPass, we work with a team of freelancers and also Smartling language services. And then if it's the teams that work with other than with us with localization other than marketing, then I mentioned, yeah, it's the legal team, the product development team, and the customer experience team. And then these kind of like break down into different departments.
Great. Good. I hope that answered your question. But if you have any further questions, just feel free to drop them in the chat. And another question that comes in, does ClassPass still have any manual localization workflows, or is everything automated via the connectors with Smartling?
Yeah, we still have some automated workflows, and these are mainly for tools or programs that we don't have connectors for. So if you think, for example, of some of our ads that are video ads, we often use After Effects, which is a common tool used for these ads. And we don't really have a tool that integrates with After Effects. So for these, we are still using the manual flow of copy pasting the text into an Excel, translating, and then copy pasting it back into After Effects to create the final translated videos. And well, I think for our videos, this actually works because we don't really have a lot of copy in the video ads. But yeah, obviously, if Smartling eventually develops a connector for After Effects, we would be very happy to use it as well.
Yep, perfect. Always looking at new connectors to build, as everyone probably knows. So yeah, we'll definitely look into that. And a couple more questions. So maybe, Margarita, you can follow up with this, but someone has asked if you have any resources to learn more about user testing that you would recommend.
Actually, that's a really good question. I actually was trained by my team, so I didn't really look at any external resources, but I'm sure that there's lots of information on Google about this, and it's used a lot, as I said, in user research. So unfortunately, I can't recommend anything from the top of my head, but I know Google will help you.
Great. And another one's come in asking, how many stages do you have with the freelancers and vendors? So I think that's with regards to your workflows.
Yeah, so in terms of stages, we have, I think, the quite standard ones. So we have translation, proofreading, and QA. So we have language leads that perform all the QAs, and then we have freelance translators and proofreaders that do translation and proofreading steps.
Great. And one's just come in. Do you work with internal managers for the languages or only freelancers?
We work with freelancers only.
Cool. Good question that's just come in. Why did you decide on Smartling as your TMS?
Okay, well, actually at ClassPass, I didn't really have a choice because when I joined ClassPass, Smartling was already being used. But I've gone through the process of choosing a TMS at another company, and I ended up going with Smartling compared to the competition. It really depends on what you want to achieve, but as I mentioned during my presentation, the visual context in Smartling, I think, is unrivaled. It's such a great tool for translators and to reduce the number of queries and the time that you spend on QAing final products. So yeah, Smartling integrates with lots of tools. It has a really good customer success management service, and really allows us to make sure that the translations are up to standard by having this very strong visual context.
Great, thank you. And I can see one more here. Do you recommend an online training for Google Analytics? We're also using it, but it's not as easy to navigate, especially for localization.
Oh, that's a very good question. I feel that pain. I still think like Google Analytics is like, it's a monster, and there's so much that it can do. I was basically, the way that I train, I did the actual Google Analytics trainings. They have several tools that if you have an account, you can use. So yeah, I recommend using Google Analytics itself and doing their trainings from scratch for beginners. Basically, up until I joined ClassPass, I never had used Google Analytics before. And then it's a matter of just spending as much time as possible in there and just trialing different ways and different views, and just trying to get the information that you want. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Kelsey. It's the Google Analytics Academy. That is really good.
Great, thank you. David has asked, how would you manage the multiple user test variants using the connectors? Are they separate jobs?
So I'm not sure if I understand the question, but basically we don't use the connectors to manage the user tests. This is a separate flow. They are not related to Smartling itself. But if you're thinking about running several tests, then you would have to create these tests separately. So for example, if I wanted to create a test that would test the flows in Spanish, in Italian, in French, in different languages, I would have to create different tests for each language. I'm not sure if this answers your question, but it's not something that is related to Smartling or run in Smartling, and we don't have to create Smartling jobs for it.
Great. Let me just have a look through the chat again. I think we've covered most things. Not sure if this applies, but since process is automated and straightforward, how do you deal with client queries, complaints after delivery, i.e. pushback to work to previous stages, etc.? This can slow a day's work, especially if the client's request affects several target languages.
Yeah, so we don't work directly with clients, so luckily we don't really get client complaints, but we do get internal feedback, and we do get a lot of click queries from the translators that we work. And in terms of how this works in an automated process, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Smartling yourself, Andre, but Smartling allows translators and allows the people that are working on the content to open queries. Actually, they're called issues, but you can open an issue directly to the right person within Smartling, answer it within Smartling, and push back content. So for example, if there's a particular issue at the review stage where the reviewer wants the translator to look at the translation again, you can reject the content back to the translator, and the translator will rework the translation, push it back to the next stage, and then it can be moved back and forth within Smartling, and it can be done directly with the translators if you have given them the right permissions to do so. So there's that way of doing that. But I've worked with client queries and client complaints directly in Smartling, and it's exactly the same process. If you have the clients reviewing in Smartling, you can allow them to have a Smartling account and to do the review in Smartling, and they can manage it by creating comments within Smartling and having this back and forth. It does add on to the time of the project, but I guess that's unavoidable.
Great, thank you. I saw Andre's just written in another question, so I'll just read that one out. Do you feel that after this process has been implemented, do you have more time for strategic thinking, replace linguists with lower quality for better ones, etc., and especially more work-personal life balance?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. I guess having these integrations implemented does allow me to have that time. I've been doing some recruitment work to get more translators to work with us because we work directly with freelancers. So yeah, I was able to spend some time on that to work on strategy and definitely better work-life balance as well.
Perfect. Thanks so much. And one more question has just come in, I think. How do you measure translation quality across different Smartling projects, with or without connectors?
Smartling has an LQA function. I think maybe, Charlotte, you can explain this one better than I do, because I don't actually use the LQA function a lot. But yeah, if you want to help me with that.
Yeah, of course. So the LQA function in Smartling allows customers to put through a random batch of jobs, on a monthly basis, different languages, different content types to, quality check the results. If it's something that you're thinking of or would like to speak about, just reach out to one of the customer success managers at Smartling and we can walk through it with you. Great. Hopefully I haven't missed anything, but I think that's all the questions that have been answered. Thank you so much, Margarita. It's been a really great session. Any final words?
No, thank you so much for having me, and thanks everyone for joining and for your questions. They've been really great. And if you are interested in ClassPass, just know that we have a 1-month free trial up until next week. So if you're interested in testing it, go for it. I use it a lot. I really like it. So yeah, suggestion.
Amazing. Great. Thanks everyone for joining today, and a huge thanks to Margarita for her time and effort contributing to this excellent presentation. For those of you who'd like to join us next week, we're uncovering the myths and realities of language AI with Olga and Gavin, experts in their own right here at Smartling. We've dropped the link in the chat to register, and we hope to see you all there. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.